All right. Good morning, everybody. Can you raise your hand if you can hear me? Wave to me. All right. That's Jim. I appreciate you jumping on because that's because of your experiences and stuff. Y'all can chit chat and the camaraderie and stuff like that. So that was good to see. We've got Auditor Harmon down here. We were all chit chatting and laughing about your all's discussion there with Judge Ison and everything. So. Gang, while you all are waiting for us to start, if you see some friends or colleagues, feel free to chit chat and converse. We're all family here and everything. So just wanted to welcome you to the class this morning. As we all talking, today's class is about ethics. How many were here yesterday? We had a class yesterday. Anybody part of that class yesterday? Yeah, we have a few. Well, yesterday was our first ever recorded class that we did. We just replayed another class that we did. We had approval from DLG to, as long as we, KCO, monitored the class as we are today, they were allowing us to replay that for hours as well. So like I said yesterday, it was live or Memorex. Well, yesterday was Memorex. Today it's live and in person, so we appreciate you being with us. Just a few housekeeping notes, as you all always know, but gotta say is you gotta make sure you stay on camera. If you gotta take or make a call, feel free to do so. Keep it brief. If you've got to step away from the camera, make sure, again, it's brief and you can come back on camera. You're mute, obviously, if you're taking a call or speaking with someone, make sure your phone, or excuse me, your camera or computer's on mute. And questions. This is a hot, great topic today, so please ask any and all questions. And you know that, like Skyline or Gold Star Chili, there's 3 ways to ask, but you all just type it in the chat box, or like I said, we're all family and colleagues here. Just interrupt and ask your question, because I'm sure the auditor won't mind, and Rich, our second presenter, won't mind as well. So with that said, I think Jim mentioned the conference, and man, he and Sonny have been working hard and diligently about that, so make sure y'all register for that coming up at the end of the month. But other than that, that's all I've got. So without further ado, Auditor, it's all yours.
Thank you. Well, how's everybody doing today? I know not everybody can respond at once. This is the weird thing about doing all these teleconferences is when I tell a joke, I don't get to hear people laugh. When I'm talking to people, never sure how they're fully responding. But it's good to see everybody, at least, on the screen today. I want to thank you all for inviting me here today and have an opportunity to have some conversations. Oh, there's somebody's phone, not mine. I'm not sure who that is, but I'm sure they'll be wanting to get that call. But no, it's an honor to be here today. You know, prior to being elected auditor back in 2015, I'd served 13 years in the Kentucky General Assembly, so certainly understand and appreciate a lot of things that dealing with counties and elected officials. But before I get too deeply into my remarks, I always like to start with something funny. And certainly, I don't know if it's a benefit or not with not being able to hear people respond. Sometimes the moans and the groans of a bad dad joke, it may be a benefit. But there was this old fella, and he wanted to buy a mule. So he contacted this one gentleman. Jim said, "Yeah, I've got a mule," and so he got him $500 for a mule. Well, he said, gentleman that he bought it from said, "I'll bring it to you in a week." So about a week later, he comes in, and he doesn't have a mule with him. And the old fella says, "Well, where's my mule?" And he says, "Well, your mule died." And he said, "He did?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, where's my money?" He said, "I'm sorry, I don't have your money." I said, I had to spend it. He said, "Well, I tell you what, bring me that dead mule here. About a week, bring me that dead mule." I said, "Bring you the dead mule? I don't know that I want to do that." He said, No, go ahead. I bought him. You need to bring him to me." He said, "Okay." He said, "What are you going to do with him?" He said, "That's my business." So about a week later, he brings that old dead mule, and Guy says, well, here's your dead mule. What are you going to do with it? He said, well, I already doubled my money. He said, doubled your money? How'd you do that? He said, well, I sold 500 $2 chances on somebody winning a mule. He said, you did what? He said, yeah, I sold 500 chances, $2 chances on a mule. He said, well, what are you going to tell the fella who won? He said, well, I'm just going to give him his money back. So I don't know specifically if that's an ethical thing or an unethical thing. Sound like maybe both of them, but certainly from a standpoint of what we're doing, it's over the years when I was in the Kentucky General Assembly, every year we actually had ethics training. I think that was very important. And I thought the one piece that I got out of all of that, of course we got plenty, but the one piece I got out of all of that I thought was probably the most effective definition of what to do that would be ethical is if you saw something, if you did something and it was published on the front page of the newspaper, would you be proud or embarrassed for your mama or your grandmama to see it? So I think that's always a good definition. Of course, the reason we as legislators began receiving ethics training is due in large part to Bob Trott, Operation Bob Trott. Now, that was predated myself, but I'd heard many stories over the years regarding that. And that investigation and the subsequent convictions and guilty pleas among members of the General Assembly prompted action to establish not only clear ethics codes, but the ability to enforce them on state and local government levels. Now, during the 1994 session of the Kentucky General Assembly, legislators passed House Bill 238. Now, it directed local governments to establish and enforce local ethics codes for county officials. Now, it's been over 25 years since that landmark bill became law, and my office decided to conduct a data bulletin on the status of local ethics codes and the enforcement in Kentucky's 120 counties. Now, our office released the data bulletin. Some of y'all, I think, were talking about it earlier, an examination of county ethics codes and enforcement yesterday. Now, you can review the full report at auditor.ky.gov, and I would encourage you to do that. So, why did we decide to do this review on this particular subject? Well, a big factor is our office, in deciding to review the status of local ethics codes and enforcement, was when we would refer, if at time to time, we would refer issues to local ethics boards. We discovered several of those boards were inactive and appointments to those boards actually had expired. Now, I've often said that the role of our office is to help make sure government, both state and local government, to be efficient, effective, and ethical. Now, based on that philosophy and the need for greater transparency and accountability, my office made the decision to take a deeper look at the local ethics codes and boards that are tasked with enforcing them. Now, among the issues we found were that 52 Kentucky counties have not updated their ethics codes since they were first put into place in 1994 and 1995. Kentucky law in KRS 65.003 requires four subjects to be addressed in an ethics code. One of them, the standards of conduct. 2, annual financial disclosure reporting. 3, nepotism. And 4, the designation of a person or group responsible for the enforcement of your code. Now, the research conducted by our auditors identified several counties that really don't have all the required components in their ethics codes, and the requirements were addressed in certainly a wide variety of ways among different counties. So everybody kind of addressed that a little bit differently. For example, some counties have a very, very strong anti-nepotism policies, while 4 counties have no ethics code provisions on nepotism at all, which certainly is clearly not compliant with the law. Now, nepotism, or even the perception of it, can have an adverse effect both within and outside the workplace. Now, most counties have an ethics code provision that defines immediate family and identifies specific relationships that are allowed or prohibited between new hires and officials or employees. Now, some counties, though, exclude spouses or children living outside the home from their definition of family members. Now, in 2 counties, the nepotism section of their code consists of a single sentence stating the employment of members of families or officials or employees of counties will be allowed. Now, although certainly this meets the statutory requirement to address nepotism, it does not seem to be certainly in the spirit of the law. Now, when it comes to the annual financial disclosures for local candidates, which, by the way, those of us certainly at the state level must follow completely, ethics codes for 10 counties don't require it for the candidates, and 3 county ethics codes do not address the financial disclosure requirement at all. Interesting enough, in addition to those, another 26 counties disclose that financial statements aren't filed annually despite their local ethics codes actually requiring it. Now, in addition, between the creation of county ethics codes, the law created by House Bill 238 directed that a local board or commission be formed with the task of making sure elected officials adhered to those codes. Well, our data bulletin found that as of August 11th, 2020, 35 counties have no one appointed to their boards, and 8 additional counties appointed members after our auditors began asking questions. So some boards have never even met due to the history of not receiving complaints. Now, although state law doesn't require local ethics boards to meet annually, our office believes a good practice would be meeting at least once a year to review financial disclosures that must be filed annually. Now, having a good an ethics code and ethics board are crucial to ensuring the public's trust in government. All local governments need to ensure they have an ethics code that meets the legal requirements and a functioning ethics board that upholds that code. And I kind of compare it a lot, sometimes when we have discussion regarding lack of segregation of duties. I know some people, kind of look at that lightly, but it's another one of those speed bumps to try to mitigate somebody going off course. Some of the biggest problems that we have seen in regard to lack of segregation of duties is you trust one person. That person was probably very trustworthy at the time, but something happens in their life and causes them to go astray. And I always jokingly say, for those of you all that are about my age or maybe a little bit older, that it's kind of like the old werewolf movies that we used to watch as kids that talked about even a man who's pure at heart and says his prayer by night can become a werewolf when the wolfbane blooms and the moon is full and bright. So it's always good to have those speed bumps to try to keep people on track, those guardrails, as I would say. So once again, I would encourage you, if you have an opportunity, to go to auditor.ky.gov. Take a look at our ethics data bulletin. I think it'll be surprising to you. And the other thing I always tell everybody, if you have any tips of waste, fraud, or abuse, certainly you can go to auditor.ky.gov as well and look at our Safe House or our tips line. And you can also call 1-800-KY-ALERT. Thank you all. God bless. Appreciate the opportunity to visit with you this morning. Hope everybody does well. I don't know if they want questions or we
Do y'all have any questions for Auditor Harmon before
questions, better joke, anything along that lines? Or
Oh, I guess I'll take this off.
all right. Well,
We do want to thank you, Auditor Harmon. I want
Thank
y'all
you.
to know, one of the cool things about maybe as I get older is that I start to meet people. So when all this started going down and you all were doing your thing and finished up your research, his office called us and said, "Hey, Rich, are y'all going to do any training on this?" I said, "By goodness, if you want us to do training, we'll be happy to." Mm-hmm. So we started working on it, and I contacted my buddy Farah, who she started about the same time I did, Assistant State Auditor, and said, "Hey, what do you think about the auditor coming on and saying hello?" And I know he's busy, and it wasn't 5-10 minutes later, I got back a response, and he was good to go. And so we really appreciate that. with a lot of our state officials, when you run a statewide office, when you're working on a variety of things, as we discussed, time is short. So we really do appreciate Auditor Harmon coming here. I talked to Shelley Hampton, our legislative director, when Auditor Harmon, would you serve 7, 8 terms in the House?
Well, I served, I guess I was in the middle of my 7th term when I was elected to auditor.
But Shelley would tell me Auditor Harmon was always willing, then Representative Harmon was always willing to take the call, always willing to visit to talk about some of the issues he wanted more information on, or us doing what we like to do, which is try to persuade.
You always got to be willing to listen to people, to the concerns. I mean, we've had several pieces of legislation, even as auditor, like our AUP bill, which has great savings. Our county clerks are finding upwards of 65% savings on their audit cost. Our sheriffs are finding upwards of 70%. And you were talking about earlier, of course, the jail canteen bill as well, but you were talking about earlier about age. And one of the things that was kind of interesting, do you realize now I am currently the oldest currently serving constitutional officer in Kentucky by 10 years. By 10 years.
I wasn't going to make a comment about that, Auditor.
The only thing that's older than him is his jokes.
But I'm
Well, I do tell a joke. This isn't actually true, but I do tell this. Well, it's true that I tell the joke. But my wife the other day would come by. Since I'm the oldest serving constitutional officer, you can imagine I would feel a little bit down. By 10 years, our Secretary of State's the closest. And she came by, and I was looking in the mirror, and I looked at her, and I looked in the mirror, and I said, honey, I look so old, and I look so tired. Can you tell me something, just anything to make me feel good about myself? And, she thought, and she paused, she thought, and she paused, and she said, well, at least your eyesight's still good. So anyway, I don't know if they liked that or laughed or didn't laugh, but no, she didn't actually say that. Thank you all so very much. I appreciate you. Thank you. Yes.
Real quick, with COVID-19 in the state of Kentucky, how, as far as the audits are concerned, are you up to date or are you behind in audits throughout the state of Kentucky?
We have actually stayed reasonably on track. I mean, we're always, even before COVID, trying to balance personnel and things along that lines. But one of the things that we did almost immediately when all of this broke, we went to basically the majority of our staff is working virtually. We reached out to officials. I'm sure many of you all were reached out to try to coordinate information without us having to actually be in personal contact. Since that time, we've kind of reviewed and reduced a little bit. We still want to be careful in regards to making sure that we respect whatever is the qualifications and the requirements, both what we set and both what the county set when it comes to interacting with officials to protect them. But we've done quite well. Now, the sad thing is when you look at, like, especially our building here in Frankfort, we've got 3 stories of a 5-story building. On any given day, we'll have 3 to 5 people at most. Generally in that building. But our county officials and those that are out in the county, they were always accustomed generally from working from home and in the offices. But I know a lot of them have told me they missed visiting with the officials as often as they normally did. So, but we're working through it like everybody else. We're trying to figure out what's the best way to address it, but we still seem to be doing pretty well.
We appreciate what you do for us.
Well, thank you. We appreciate what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Auditor.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it. Y'all take care. I don't know if y'all can see this or not, but I'm going to move this out of my way. My wife said the one thing she missed from in-person voting, because we dropped ours off at the box, was the I voted sticker. So one of my shrewd purchases, as I sat on my front porch, was my I voted face mask. So I don't know if you can see it or not. I can wear it for about 2 weeks, and then it's going to have to sit around and hopefully never be used again. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to go probably for another 40, 45 minutes. Probably take a 5-minute break because I am now on my 4th cup of coffee, and so I'm probably going to need a short break. We'll come back about 5 after 10 and go till 11 o'clock. We are going to talk about a variety of ethics issues. I actually created a brand new presentation. This was our materials for today. I don't know if you can see that. It's about 1 inch, maybe 1.5 inches thick. Yesterday you should have received an email, the PowerPoint, the statute, and a couple of ethics codes. Those 2 ethics codes, which I labeled A and B, are not CACO products. They're actually ethics codes from out in the state, from some of your fellow counties. And we're not endorsing. There's things I would change. There's things I wouldn't change. But I think they're good things to look at. I think that gives some opportunities. And really what I have them there for is the enforcement mechanism. I thought their enforcement mechanisms were as good or better than anything I could discuss or create for you. So we're going to get started. The way we always do it, if you ever need us, 800-264-5226. My cell phone is 859-333-8350. Again, 333-8350. Don't hesitate to call me on this type of issue or any other issue, right? On a side note, Judge Morris, if you're wondering where your email is, the one you sent me yesterday afternoon, it will be done after I eat lunch today. Because after 11 o'clock, I'm going to be hungry. But I will get your email back to you. Obviously, you made the first screen, Judge, or I would not know you were on. So let's go ahead and get started, because we got plenty to talk about. Let's see here. So, Code of Ethics. There's a couple things I did. I didn't want to just do the same old thing I've done before. You know, I did this class in 2017 as a night class. And night classes are fine, but most of y'all are ready to get home, and they're a little quiet. So I want to look at a couple studies. So basically what you're getting today is a brand new presentation. I looked at a couple studies I could find online, nothing recent, but dealing with local government ethics. There's stuff out there about state government ethics, but not really a whole lot of studies on local government ethics. But it turned out the University of Kentucky in 2003 did a study. And I don't know that I agree with all their conclusions. Kind of reminded me of big city people not necessarily knowing how the rest of the state is. And as somebody who grew up in Louisville and lives in Lexington, I have a completely different perspective, having done this job for now 20 plus years. But it's a good thing, it's a good study, it's a good read, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. I also looked at a pilot study, local government ethics in South Carolina, a pilot study of perceptions and practices. I also looked at some things that they're doing in North Carolina. I wanted some comparisons to what we do. So why are we doing this? What's the purpose? And when I say why, the why isn't this statute, 65003. The why is, why do we really do this? You know, there were counties before 1995 that had ethics, right? And they may not have called it a separate ethics code, but they had things that mattered. They had things you could and couldn't do. They had a conduct section. Some of them had nepotism sections. Some of them had financial disclosures, maybe not as explicit. So why are we doing this besides the fact that the statute says we have to do this? We're doing this for the things you see up here, right? Public trust, the negative impact on governance. You know, there are some studies that say that you get less public participation and fewer qualified candidates when your government looks like a boondoggle, right? That's just the way it is. Economic impact. There is a potential negative impact. You know, when a company is looking at locating in your community, you know, if they want to bring in a factory, they're not going to spend all that money without looking at you all, right? They're going to look at your past newspapers. They're going to do their Google research, right? And it does have an impact. If they don't think they can trust you, maybe they don't feel like they can trust your predecessors. And there's another opportunity, another county in another state or within Kentucky that doesn't have this negative press. That does make an impact. And then let's talk about what just happened here a second ago. Auditor Harmon was not the first auditor to look at ethics. I've started with DLG in 1998. So in my career, I'm aware of 3 auditors who have looked at ethics. Auditor Hatchett in 2000 did local government ethics codes and boards, an August 2000 performance audit. And pretty much his findings were pretty similar to what Auditor Harmon has. I couldn't find a published report that Auditor Llewellyn did, but I remember being at the Department for Local Government, and I was there till 2007 when this started happening in her office, when her staff started going around and checking ethics codes and seeing if there were boards. you know, the one, and I kind of get ahead of myself, but the one thing that we see more often than not over the years is that the real issue folks have is when there's not an ethics board. Some of y'all have not put an ethics board in place since the original back in '95. And that's not normally a problem until somebody wants to file a complaint. By the way, I did want to go back and tell you how we got to here, because I think it's pretty important. I've got plenty of work to do without worrying about ethics codes. But back in July, I got a call or an email from the auditor's office saying, hey, Rich, we're auditing ethics. Does CAECO offer any training? And I said, you know, I did a training class in 17. I did one this year for tourism for the Convention and Visitors Bureau, but I hadn't planned to do another one until probably in the next term. But if y'all want us to do one, we're happy to do one. And so, checked with Jim. Jim said, yeah, by all means, we're going to do one. Put it together, asked the auditor if he'd like to come and speak. He, of course, was more than happy to, which we appreciate. And that's how we got here. We weren't aware of yesterday's audit report coming out. We knew there would be one. We didn't know when. So, and I'm not completely surprised that it came out yesterday, being that we were dealing with this today. But again, we didn't go out and look because, let's face it, this is your all's deal. But I did want you to know that our role here is purely for educational purposes and to assist you all as needed. So let's talk about some of the stuff in those reports that I read. Some light reading. So some of the things they talked about in South Carolina, some of the quotes. By the way, it's the next slide, never mind. Public trust is the most important asset of government because it provides reassurance that the organization is acting in the best interest of the community. I mean, let's be honest. Every one of you all got elected by your citizenry because the people that voted for you trusted you, right? I know most of you. I would trust you. But a scandal, even if it's not your fault, rests on your shoulders. So they kept on talking, and I think this is a really good quote. Over time, with cable networks and the constant news cycle, even small infractions become big stories. As previously stated, this can degrade the public trust. You know, we've talked about that before in other classes I've taught, panels I've sat on. The news media has truly changed county government, right? And that's not a bad thing. The internet has truly changed county government. And because so much more information, true and not true, is now available. And little things become that mountain, even though they're really just that molehill. You know, she goes on further, the writer says, ethics complaints filed against public officers quadrupled in Florida from 74 to 90. There's multiple explanations. Some of it's because their population grew so much. But some of it is just more informed citizens. And whether they're correctly informed or incorrectly informed, they now have more knowledge. And she went further to say that there's a group called the Ethics Resource Center, and they, of course, they're the Ethics Resource Center, so they may be a little slanted, but they found that when a well-implemented ethics and compliance program is coupled with a strong ethical culture, misconduct decreases by 60% and reporting increases by 40%. You know, I don't know how they studied that, but it makes sense. So I thought the perfect example of ethical issues was former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich, who allegedly, I think he was convicted of it, tried to sell a Senate seat appointment. I don't think I have the money to buy a Senate seat appointment. So I found his picture, because that's a perfect example of what we don't want to see, right? Even on a smaller scale. So in addition to violating, and this is the state study, in addition to violating the trust of the electorate, unethical behavior by government officials can have deleterious effects on democratic governments. And again, this is where they talk about, perhaps of equal concern, the quality of candidates might suffer because the most highly qualified individuals might shun public service if the government is viewed as corrupt. So I think those are legit concerns. You know, I didn't mention this earlier, but most of you have seen me talk. if you have a question, if you have a comment, you feel free to throw it out. Because it's a lot more fun if you all talk back. So, let's talk about South Carolina and North Carolina very briefly. South Carolina is way more centralized. What I mean by centralized, their state ethics commission, their rules are on a state level. It's applicable to state and local governments and their employees. It's not like the 120 ethics boards we have in Kentucky, or less because of some interlocal agreements. The North Carolina is more like us. And what their basic statute says, and by the way, their assistance group, there is a centralized group though, at the University of North Carolina School of Government. And what their statute basically says is the need to obey all applicable laws regarding official actions taken as a board member, the need to uphold the integrity and independence of the board, the need to avoid impropriety in the exercise of their official duties, the need to faithfully perform the duties of the office, and the need to conduct the affairs of the governing board in an open and public manner. That's their guidance for the local government ethics codes. It reminds me a lot of ours. And then let's talk about scandals. Because scandals usually lead to legislation, and it did in this case. And I know Auditor Harmon briefly mentioned it. In '92, there was Operation Bop Trot. It had to do with horse racing, harness racing, if I recall correctly. It was a bribery scandal. There were multiple federal indictments and convictions at the state level, the state legislature. So that was in '92. In '92, the Executive Branch Code of Ethics came into being. The next year was the Legislative Branch Code of Ethics, and in '94, they passed our statute, the local government ethics requirements. 4 years later, the Downey scandal. It was a sex prostitution scandal, more federal indictments, more convictions, shined additional light on ethics issues. Now, I'm not saying that the Downey scandal impacted our ethics statute, 65003, but what I am saying is every time there's a scandal, at the federal level, at the state level, neighboring community, people do look at you all. You're the government officials they actually know. And so those things do have an effect on you all. And I didn't bring up any of the county government or city government type issues that have happened over the years. Those are going to happen, we know that. It's just part of what we do. Things unfortunately happen no matter the best of our intentions. So let's talk about 65003. It's the code of ethics for cities, counties, so on and so forth, right? It has been amended. This is just the title and the history, right? It's been amended 9 times. It was created, it's been amended 8 times. It was created in '94. It was amended in '98, amended in '96, amended several times since. Of the 9 versions, a few were minor. 2 were because DLG changed their name to Gold and then changed it back. One of the amendments was because KRS 67C was created. That's Louisville Metro. One was done because they created the Special Purpose Governmental Entity Chapter, 65A, and had to reference that. So not all of these were changes because of outside things that occurred, negative things, but several of them were. So does it apply to you? I'm not going to say I'm a huge Willy Wonka fan, but growing up, my dad loved Willy Wonka. So if it was going to be on TV, we were going to have to watch it. So it's sort of a nightmare to me now. But does it apply to you? So many of us say, who me? Does this apply to me? It doesn't apply to me, never. It applies to the other guy, right? Well, that's not the case. So let's talk about this statute. Let's talk about Chapter 65A, and we'll go from there. I'm not going to read a lot of this to you because it's a lot, and you all have the statute handy. But the governing body of each local government shall adopt by ordinance a code of ethics. And you all did that in 1994. In 1994, the Department for Local Government, before I was there, created a draft ethics code, which many of you all adopted. The majority of you all adopted. By the way, you know, the auditor mentioned that of you all, 52 counties are still using the original ethics code. Well, folks, there's nothing wrong with that. You have to understand, an ethics code just tells you what you have to do, right? Being ethical in 1995 and being ethical today, that really hasn't changed. I mean, there may be things that you all want to change, but if you had a good code, and by a good code, I'm talking about a code that meets the statutory requirements that your citizenry is happy with, then that code that became effective in 95 is good today. There's no reason you have to change it unless you want to change it. So, the governing body of each local government shall adopt by ordinance a code of ethics, which has to apply to all the electeds and to appointeds and employees as specified in the code of ethics. And I put that in bold, right? I put that in bold because that's up to you all. You know, Boyd County could decide, and I don't know what Boyd County decided, that it should apply to certain employees, the road foreman, the treasurer, but not other employees, not Joe Road Worker. And then maybe you go across the state to Callaway County, and Callaway County may say, you know what? We want it to apply to everybody. Everybody may be overly broad because there's a lot of things in your ethics code that would not apply to a Joe Road Worker probably. It just depends on what you do and where you are. And candidates for the local government elective offices shall comply with the annual financial disclosure statement filing requirements. So y'all know you have to have a financial disclosure, and for those of you in your first term, in the year of the election, you should have had to have done a financial disclosure. And remember, you all create that financial disclosure. And we're going to talk about that some more. But let's talk about special purpose governmental entities. One of the amendments to 65003 said the SPGEs are subject to a code of ethics. And so what's an SPGE? Just so you remember, it's pretty much all your districts and some of your nonprofits doing governmental work. So 65A070 says, and again, only in part, the board, officers, and employees of each SPGE are subject to the code of ethics of the establishing entity in which its principal office is located. That means your all's. Unless it was created by the city and within the city, they're going to be subject to your code of ethics. If it's in more than one establishing entity, then they get to select their own, which one they want. And if there's no establishing entity, it's where they're located. The governing body can adopt ethics code provisions that are more stringent. I don't know if any have done that, but they can. And then they have to notify DLG. Do y'all have any questions, any questions at this point? That's too bad. It's a whole lot easier with questions. But let's keep going. So what does it mean? Counties and cities have to have ethics codes that apply to all elected officials. Period. SPGs are subject to the code of ethics of who created it, by and large. All your ethics codes can apply to appointed officers and employees at your discretion, which does bring up an interesting issue. What does this mean for SPGEs that have non-elected board members where the establishing entity is inapplicable to non-elected officers and staff, right? So think about that. You're an ambulance district board. None of them are elected, right? So if your ethics code says it does not apply to any appointed officials, and your ambulance district has to utilize your all's ethics code, or utilizes your ethics code, then the ambulance district board members are free and clear. I don't think that was the intent, but I think that's what the law says. I think it's even more screwy when you look at a fire district. If a fire district has elected and non-elected members, do some have to comply and some don't? And we don't really know the answer to those questions. I can tell you what I think, but I'm not a circuit judge or the Court of Appeals or Justice Ornstein, though I think that is a cool title. But we don't know. So candidates, again, they have to comply with the financial disclosure statements. And to me, the two biggest things in the ethics codes, at least from a public standing, are the financial disclosure statements and the ethics boards, right? Those are, to me, are the two things that are most likely to trip you all up based off the phone calls I've gotten over the last 20 years. Why do they trip you all up? Because if you don't have the financial disclosure statements, which can be really, really innocuous, people jump on that because they think your board members or your elected officials are hiding something, right? And then when there is a complaint, and some of y'all haven't had a complaint ever. Some of y'all, I got a call a few weeks ago. It was like the first complaint they'd had in 8 or 10 years. Well, the complaint has to go to the board. Well, the board doesn't exist. It was created, but there were no board members. And that became a problem. And you have to figure somebody that has an axe to grind with you or somebody who has seen something that they think is wrong, whether it was or not, when then they find out that there's no body that's supposed to be there overseeing, that makes the problem a whole lot worse. And let's be honest, your news media loves it. If I was a newspaper writer, if I was a reporter, man, that would be, that'd be awesome, right? So what has to be in an ethics code? It's 4 things, really. Standards of conduct, financial disclosure, again, elected officials, candidates, appointed officials and employees as designated. Nepotism. Can you hire your kid? Can you hire your wife? Can you hire your mom and dad? And the enforcement mechanism. My wife and I were talking about this last night a little bit. We have a lot of exciting conversations at dinner. And during the first couple months of COVID, we had to work in the same house. We live in the same house. We were both working in the same house. We were, 30 feet apart in 2 different rooms. I don't know that I could work with my wife as much as I love my wife. I sure don't think I could hire her because, boy, it just doesn't work. And I'm just going to stop there. So what does that all mean? The court has the discretion to enact an ethics code that reflects the best interests of the county. While you have to address all 4 mandates, how you address it is up to you. And when you look at pull this out here. By the way, these are the 2 articles that I read. I didn't have to read. If you want them, happy to get them. Well, this is one of the 2 articles. This is the auditor's report, if you haven't seen it yet. It's, I think, 39 or 49 pages, most of which are attachments, 39 pages, about 16, 17 pages of text. And I do think it's probably worth your while. If you haven't read it, pull it offline. It's auditor.ky.gov and take a look. Again, if you just read the content and not the attachments, it won't take you that long. But a lot of what's in here, I think, is good advice. Some of what's in here is you've got to follow the law. But some of what's in here is what I would call best practices. And I think they probably, in some cases, truly are best practices. But those are things that you have to make a determination on. And those are things that your citizenry get to make the decision on whether or not you did a good job with it, right? So, again, things like I haven't amended my ethics code since it was passed in '94 isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just a thing. I do think you should look at them annually, but it doesn't mean you have to change them annually. It's sort of like your admin code. The statute requires you to look at it annually. Being that you have to do financial disclosures annually, or you're supposed to, I would look at my ethics code annually, just to see if there's anything wrong. But again, that's your choice. And again, that also goes to things like nepotism, we're going to talk about later. The nepotism policy in Hancock County and the nepotism policy in Christian County don't have to be the same, but if your citizenry is happy with it, that's all that matters, as long as you address it. And I apologize that I keep walking out of the screen, and I'd like to tell you I'm going to change that, but I don't think I'm going to be able to change that because I've been doing it for a long, long time. So let's talk about enforcement. So enforcement, an individual or group must be designated, okay? I don't know of any of you all who only designated an individual. I think every one of you all has a group that does enforcement. Their duties include maintenance of financial disclosure, receipt of complaints, issuance of opinions, investigation of violations, potential violations, imposition of any penalties referenced within the Code of Ethics. That's what they're supposed to do. I mean, it's pretty simple, it's pretty easy. You have an ethics code, you have an ethics board, and they have certain duties to do. In most of your cases, they won't have anything to do other than receive the financial disclosures, right? So many of you all, let's see, I can see the chat now. Okay, is that the only question, John? Okay, if you have a nepotism policy, well, can you put it back up? If you have a nepotism policy, but statute allows other leaders to appoint their staff, for example, okay, so, thanks, John. So, the two really aren't related, right? The appointment of officials, in chapter 70 was referenced, that's the sheriff's chapter.
Sure.
The statute says the sheriff can appoint whoever he wants. I guess there is a relation. Here's the overlap, right? One of the things we've talked about over the years is statutes are here. Like, think of it like a book. The statute might be the heading, and the ordinance is the subheading, right? So the statute says, got to have an ethics code, you got to hit nepotism. Then the ordinance says you can't hire your child, your mother, your father, whatever. Well, guess what? The ethics code is applicable to the elected officers. So if fiscal court made a determination that you can't hire a family member and define family member out to first cousin, the sheriff would not be allowed to hire his first cousin. He can hire whoever else he wants to, right? He can hire a second cousin. He can hire people unrelated, and fiscal court has no say-so in that. But if fiscal court passes an ordinance, the ethics code, and says you can't hire family members and defines it out to first cousins, the jailer can't hire his first cousin. The sheriff, the clerk, the county attorney, the coroner, you can't hire your first cousin. That's what that means. So there is an overlap. While the sheriff, the clerk, the jailer, so on and so forth, can hire whoever they want, assuming they got the budget and whatnot, they still have to comply with the ethics code. They may not like it, but there's a lot of things for you fiscal court members up there that you all do that your sheriff, your clerk, your jailer, and your county attorney, and sometimes your coroner don't like. How do I know this? Because they call me and say, they can't do this. I'm like, yeah, actually they can do this. Whether it's wise or not, that's a judgment call, right? And I appreciate the question. It kind of helps to, sometimes I think I know what you all are thinking, but it's sort of like I think I know what my wife's thinking and I don't. So if you have a question, I don't care if you think it's a stupid question, ask your question because I guarantee you there's somebody else with the same idea. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through about a few more slides, and then we're going to take that 5-minute break, so about 10 minutes, maybe a little bit less, and we're going to come back and actually go over one or two ethics codes and some things and talk about some of the things that are out there and some of the things that maybe don't make sense as good policy. Some things may. So can an interlocal be regional? One of the things the legislature really loves right now, and really they've loved it for quite some time, is you all acting jointly with other local governments. They really dig that on all sorts of areas. Whether it's road work, when you all work with another county to decide who's going to take care of a road at the eastern edge of the county, which is the western edge of the neighboring county. They love that stuff, and they love it here too. One of the amendments to 65003 was about regionalism. You do need to have an interlocal, That's the deal you submit to DLG. It needs to have things like the content, the administration, the enforcement. I think there are 3 current, what I would call regional enforcement authorities. The one I have up here is the Northern Kentucky Regional Ethics Authority. And while I list all the counties in the Northern Kentucky Ad, because it is housed at Northern Kentucky Ad and staffed by Northern Kentucky Ad, not every county is involved. In fact, the only county fiscal court that's involved is Pendleton. But most of the counties listed, at least one city in Northern Kentucky Ad belongs to the Northern Kentucky Regional Ethics Authority. And I think Gallatin's doesn't, and there may be one other. And so what do they do? What does the Barren River Ad or Cumberland Valley Ad do? Because they are also regional authorities in that aspect. They are the enforcement mechanism. They don't write your ethics code, but they're the people that get the complaint. They're the people that keep the financial disclosures for you all, so you don't have to worry about it. It's a nice way to do it, and I know your ads very much appreciate the opportunity to work with you. So what happens? Back in 1994, when you passed them, you had to have it within 21 days to DLG. If you amend it within 21 days, you got to get it to DLG. Where can you find them? If you want to see what a neighboring county is doing, go to kydlgweb.ky.gov, and actually I put it on there, legal, blah, blah, blah. The easy way is go to DLG's website, hit the legal tab, and at the top there's ethics codes, there's interlocal agreements, and there's something else. I forget what the third thing is. Click on ethics codes, and they're in there by county as a drop box. There's a few that are screwed up, but almost all of them are in there. There's also a website, amlegal.com, A-M-L-E-G-A-L, again, amlegal.com. And it's a free site. I mean, I think there's a version you can pay for, but what it has on there are a bunch of county ordinances. Well, I say a bunch. About 6 to 8 counties, I think, pay for AmLegal, and there are a lot of cities that pay for AmLegal. And you can go in and see pretty much all of their ordinances online. Boone County is an example. I think Davis might use AmLegal. There's several others. Barron, I know Barron uses it. And oftentimes when you all call me and say, Rich, how can I do this? I'll jump on AmLegal and steal something from them. So AmLegal is also a good opportunity to look at some ethics codes. And one of the pluses of AmLegal, it's easier to read. Some of these codes, back in 94 or 95, they haven't aged as well as some others. They were typed in with a typewriter. So they're a little harder to read. So can you get rid of your ethics code? Can you dump it? Well, you can't abolish it, but you can amend it, right? But you got to address everything in the code. So what happens if you don't address all 4 issues? What happens if you decide we don't need no nepotism? We do need a good English grammar teacher for me. But if we don't need nepotism, we don't need a nepotism requirement, or we don't need a financial disclosure requirement, and you take it out, if DLG realizes it, and they should, when it comes in, they have to contact state agencies, they have to contact the ads, and guess what? They cut off your payments. They cut off your services. So if you have a nice big fat CDBG project going, guess what? DLG can't pay you out. So that's a problem. They can then restart the services, they can restart the payments once you're in compliance. And I'm not aware of this having happened since 1998 when I started, but it could. By the way, when they first put this statute 65003 in place, there were only 3 entities that chose not to comply. And they were all 3 cities, and their combined population was under 800. So you had 3 very small cities, combined population of 800. They were the only entities that did not comply back then. So everybody complied, and that's a good thing, right? So we'll go ahead and do 5 more minutes and then stop. I'm going to at least go over a few definitions, and then we'll talk about some things. Is there a question? Nope. All right, definitions. Let's talk about family member. And so what I did, and these actually came in when I did this back in 17, I looked at several counties, and I picked out 3 or 4 counties and started going through their codes, their ethics codes, because I wanted to see some things. Now, one county that I looked at, they didn't have a definition of family member, which is fine. They don't have to, but they do have to have some way to talk about nepotism and talk about some other things. And so one went spouse, parent, child, brother, sister, grandparent. You can see it's in-law, son-in-law, step-parents, stepchildren, half-children, half-brothers. I don't know if you can have I guess you can have a half-child. I guess it's a stepchild. And half-sisters, right? One went a little smaller, the wife, the kids, parents, siblings, in-laws, grandparents, grandchildren. One went much smaller, just a spouse, unemancipated children, or somebody claimed on your taxes. And then some don't define family member, and that's fine too. And let's see, we have 4 minutes. The rule of necessity. There's a few counties out there that have what they call the rule of necessity. And what it basically means, it's in the best, and this one it was a contract issue. They can enter into a contract in which an officer, employee, or family member has an economic interest if it's disclosed and it's on the record, it's in the best interest. So here's the deal. That rule of necessity probably works with an employee. That rule of necessity does not work with the magistrate, for example, or the judge, because we have a statute, a specific statute that says you can't be interested in contracts with the county, right? So if I own a hardware store and I am a magistrate, I don't care if the rule of necessity exists or not. Statutorily, I can't enter into a contract with the county, even if I'm the best deal going. If I was in McCracken County and the rule of necessity said, we needed to feed for a meeting, we needed to purchase food for something, and I wanted the best caterer around, and if I'm the McCracken County government, I'd probably go to Jeff Parker and say, Jeff Parker, I need a caterer. And Jeff Parker would say, well, I know a great caterer. It's my family. Except the problem is Jeff Parker couldn't enter into that agreement because he can't be interested in a contract with the county. The rule of necessity would not work there. And I have had their food. It really is good. I'm not just saying that. As somebody that likes to eat, it's really, really good. County government employees, we'll go 2 more minutes and then take a 5-minute break. County government employees, any person, whether compensated or not, full or part, employed by or serving the county government, but does not mean an employee of a school district or school board. Well, so what does that mean? Any person, compensated or not, means volunteers. The volunteer for this purpose is a county government employee. Full-time and part-time doesn't matter. At a county didn't define county government employee. And again, that's okay because you don't have to have county government employees covered. That's a local decision. Number 3, any person, compensated or not. So again, volunteers are okay. They're county government employees for this purpose. Full or part-time, employed by or serving the county government or a county government agency, but does not mean employees of a school district, because this doesn't apply to the school districts. They have their own. We'll do the last one here and take a break. County government officer, any person, compensated or not, full or part-time, who's elected to any county government office. Any person who serves as a member of the governing body of the county government agency or special taxing or non-taxing district. So they decided a county government officer for purposes of this statute includes your boards and your districts. Again, County 2 had none, and County 3 was pretty much the same, similar to number 1, just used more words. So again, the definitions, county to county, can change. We're going to talk about a few more when we get back. Specifically, we're going to talk about financial disclosures, some of the other things, nepotism for certain. People love nepotism. And so it's 10 o'clock on the dot by my watch. Let's go till 10:05, and we'll start back up. And I thank you. You know, there's some things you just can't make fun. And ethics is one of those things where there aren't a lot of fun examples out there. So we're doing the best we can, and we'll go forward and see where we head. So, one of the things John mentioned was, I forgot to show you the county government employee, county government officer slide, but again, you do have those there. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about financial disclosure. We're going to talk about, like I said, a little bit about nepotism. Going to show you a short example. And talk a little about the Ethics Commission. And then we're going to go and talk about and go over, just got out of order, County 2's Code of Ethics. I'm not going to tell you which county that is, unless I accidentally tell you which county that is, because it is an actual ethics code. It's a city-county ethics code, and I liked it for a lot of reasons we're going to go over here in a minute. All right, since I think most of us are back, we're going to get started. So, let's talk about financial disclosures. And again, this is based off of, obviously all this is based off the statute. So let's talk about financial disclosures. And one of the things I've learned doing these classes is that I may have to start getting glasses. There is a large screen that you all can't see about 15 feet away from me. And it's hard to read, to be blunt. It wouldn't have been hard to read 20 years ago. So, who's involved? In this example, and it's a real example, the following individuals shall be required, as defined in the body of this document, to file a financial disclosure. All of the elected officers annually. By the way, that's not an option. That's one of the statutory requirements. You know, while we have the ability, and I say county governments, have the ability to, sorry, I think John's trying to help me now see better, or change his camera. Thank you. While we have the ability to change a lot of things in our ethics codes, one of the things we don't have the ability to change is the things that are mandated. We can take those mandates and address them how we wish to address them, but we do have to address them. So, elected officers annually have to file a financial disclosure. Candidates have to file within 21 days of filing. So I don't have to file one if I'm just talking about running, but after I go file that paperwork, I've got to file one. Management personnel, and this is the example, right? We know that you all decide who files them, electeds and people running for office. But you all can make other employees, other non-elected officers to file. So this one, management personnel, such as chief deputies, department heads, as potential conflicts of interest arise. Now I'll tell you this, I hate that sentence. As an attorney, I don't like it at all. One, I don't like things like such as, right? What does that mean? So chief deputy is going to be an example, but who else does that apply to? What if I don't call my chief deputy? What if I call him captain, right? If it's a sheriff's department and my chief deputy is Captain John Sharp, does this apply to him? John Sharp, when he gets in trouble, might try to argue it does not apply to him. So if you're going to list it out, I like listing out titles. And here's the other thing I don't like. As potential conflicts of interest arise. So when do I have to file it? See, let's say John is my chief deputy and I'm a sheriff. How does that work, right? Does John know that he has a conflict of interest? John may not know every contract the county has. John wouldn't know every contract the county has, right? John may not know that he has a potential conflict of interest. You would hope he would. So I guess in my mind, if you're going to make John or someone equivalent to John file, make him just file. Don't say as conflicts of interest arise, because I'm not 100% sure what that means. And I don't think John would necessarily know, and I'm setting up John for failure. And myself for failure, because let's be honest, I don't care if it's the chief deputy in the sheriff's office or the clerk's office, if it becomes an issue, it makes all of you look bad, right? It doesn't matter because it's county government doing it. Next one, officers and employees with procurement authority exceeding $500 per purchase. Again, I don't have a problem with that because you know which employees have the ability to get that PO. But again, it's that as potential conflicts of interest arise. Again, you're putting your employees and you're putting yourself in a bad spot, in my opinion. Financial disclosure statement shall be on a form setting forth the above. Financial disclosures, no later than July 1. That's perfect, right? You can choose the date. But it's got to be filed annually. Make sure your code has a date. Otherwise, when do I file the thing? Am I late if I don't file it till January 5 if you don't have a date? I could see a newspaper or a radio station saying, hey, you got to file it annually. It's January 1. Where is it? You know, here at CAECO, certain employees have to do a financial disclosure. I'm one of them. Our board members have to do financial disclosures. Actually, we used one of the counties as a model. And they're due by, I believe, January 31 or February 1. I think it's January 31. First thing I do when I come back after New Year's is I send out the form to all of our board members. I send out the form to all of our staff that are required to do one. And they fill it out, but they have a month. And they know they have a month to do it. And when I get to the end of January, a few days before, I'll call them up or I'll email them and say, hey, by the way, can you send me your form? If you don't have a date, when is it due? You know, again, I'm a big fan of not setting myself up for failure. I'm also a big fan of not putting myself in a corner. You know, don't say it's due January 5 if you don't think 5 days is long enough to collect them all. Candidates should be required to file the statement no later than 21 days after the filing date. That's statutory. Newly appointed officers, chief deputies, department heads, boards and commission members shall be required to file their statement no later than 21 days after the initial discovery of said potential conflict of interest. Man, if you're going to make them do it, just make them do it. Just that simple. At least that's my opinion. I think it's, again, to me, and again, this is discretionary because you don't have to make some of these people do it. Set yourself up to win, not to fail. The financial disclosure statement for elective, that should be elected, not elective. Elected officers and candidates, or an official or an employee that has an interest in matters currently before the county government shall include the following information. Tells you everything there. The name of the filer, their business address, their business number, the title of their office or the office being sought, the occupation of the filer and spouse, positions held in certain businesses. There's all sorts of things, but none of these things are really that imposing in my mind, right? Where does your wife work, if she works? And from which they receive in excess of $10,000 during the preceding calendar year. If you have a job, you're making more than $10K a year, right? Name and address of each source of income. So I know where my wife works. I put it on the form. And let's be honest, you're a citizen and you know where you work, especially if you're in a smaller community, or where your wife works or your child works, if it goes that far, it doesn't have to. All your real property other than your primary residence, in which you have an interest of $10,000 or more. Any officer or employee.
Hey, Rich, can you take a question on that?
Yeah, by all means, Judge, please.
When you say that, let's say I have 5 rental properties. I have to disclose all of my rental properties, my farm, my businesses, all that have to be disclosed?
It's going to depend, and I'm pulling out the statute because when in doubt, grab the statute. It's going to depend in a lot of instances what you have to do based upon your financial disclosure statement that was adopted by, in your case, Shelby County. So let's read what this says. This is the requirement in 65003. Counties are required, and I say counties, we know it's cities, for creation of financial disclosure statements, which have to be filed annually by all candidates, elected officials, and other officials or employees as specified in the Code of Ethics, and which shall be filed with the person or group responsible for enforcement of the code. Now, if Shelby County doesn't require that you list all the properties you own that cost more than, or that have a value of more than X dollars, you don't have to file it, Judge. It's just
Okay.
what's on your form. The example I'm using, again, came from another county. Obviously came from a county. It's the example that we used here at CAECO. And I'll be honest, I used it because they had it in a Word doc format, so I didn't have to retype it in. And they required that. But if yours does not, you don't have to. And I thank you for the question. I think those are things that I think folks ought to realize. So many of you all just adopted what DLG put out in 1994, and I don't know that any of you all were even around in 1994. I wasn't. You know, I was talking to Shelley Hampton, our legislative director, this morning, and we have employees here who weren't alive when this statute was passed. So a lot of us don't know how all this went around. Does a board appointment need fiscal court vote? Okay. This isn't necessarily on point, but the question was, does a board appointment need a fiscal court vote? And the statutes aren't really clear, Commissioner, whether or not that has to happen, but there is a court case that came out of Jefferson County pre-merger, and that court case basically said yes. And I don't remember if it was the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court that said yes. Board appointments are supposed to have fiscal court approval. You know, when you read the statute itself, I don't think that's what it says, but I may disagree, but that's what the court case said. And if you want a copy of that case, Commissioner, shoot me an email or send me a text, and I'll be happy to get it to you.
I'll send you an email.
Perfect. So, and I encourage any question you all have. I don't care if it's directly on point or not, as you all know. I may wait to the end to answer it, but that was an easy one, at least because we get it, right? In my example on number 9, I think, any officer, employee, or member of his family who shall have any private financial interest, directly or indirectly, in any contract before the department or agency. Obviously, magistrates, judges, and some others. It lists specific offices. Then let's see here. And again, talks about your districts. And then a little bit more. It has to be signed and dated by the individual filing the statement. In this example, signing a fraudulent statement becomes a Class A misdemeanor. All financial disclosures are open records. And don't forget, they are open records, right? And so be it. And it's filed with the Ethics Commission. And it's supposed to be filed with the Ethics Commission. How they choose to store it may be set out in your ordinance or maybe set out in the regulations they create. Here's an example of one. I know it's hard to read. This is basically what I took from the county that I stole ours from. Very simple again. Most of the stuff on here is very, very innocuous stuff. It's not things that is going to surprise anybody, right? But again, it's up to your ethics code. As long as you comply with 65003, you're gold. Let's talk about nepotism. People love nepotism. It's a very sexy topic, as my friend Roger Rechtenwald would say, at least for ethics, right? After the effective date of this ordinance, a family member. These are just 3 examples. Remember, the statute only says, by the way, the standards of conduct, it just says you have to have it, right? Standards of conduct for elected and appointed officials and employees. You have to have standards of conduct for your officials and employees. So your employees do have to abide by the standards of conduct portion of your policy. So nepotism, a policy on the employment of members of the families of officials or employees as specified in the Code of Ethics. So, after the effective date of this ordinance, a family member of a county officer, and they defined officer, shall not be initially employed or appointed to a position in a governmental agency in the same county in which the officer serves unless reviewed by the Ethics Commission with an opinion presented, I think it's what presented to the fiscal court. They did exempt people that had already worked there for 6 months. The next one, in number 2, they list out the actual family members. shall not be initially employed or appointed to a county government agency in the same county in which the elected official serves. By the way, if you're going to say county government agency, define it so people know exactly what it is. In the same county in which the elected official serves. Because I could think of an agency as being a department within the county, or I might consider an agency to be a special district. This provision shall not apply to an elected official's spouse, child, parent, so on and so forth, who on the day of the election or appointment has been employed for at least 6 months. Doesn't apply to, if you get married, your wife doesn't have to get fired or the husband doesn't have to get fired. You can keep working. Though they may recommend a lateral transfer, a substitute supervisor or something. And then no county government officer or county government employee shall act in his or her capacity to hire or cause to be hired any member of his immediate family or her immediate family at an hourly pay rate with benefits in excess of any other employee with similar job duties, responsibilities, and requirements. So what this one's saying is you can hire your family members, but you can't pay them more than you pay somebody else with similar duties, responsibilities, qualification requirements. You know, you do need to look at some of these things. I could see, notice the last thing, qualifications. Well, that's in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? At least it is in my mind. So that's something that kind of sets you up for potential litigation down the road, I think. You know, we've seen some, the auditor mentioned, I think there's 2 or 3 counties that didn't address it. There's a couple that say we do not prohibit nepotism, and that's their right. If Joe Citizen is okay with that, it may not be a best practice. Maybe it is a best practice. Who am I to say? It may not be what the legislature intended. But if they left it up to you all to say that, and your citizenry is okay with that, you know, so be it. So we're going to talk about the Ethics Commission membership for briefly, then we're going to go over County Ordinance number 2, which you all should have received yesterday. If you didn't receive it, let me know, and I will send it to you after we get done. So in this example, or in these examples, Ethics Commission, 3 members, no electeds, 1 public official maximum. The chair, it needs to be a citizen member. Vacancies filled within 60 days. After 60 days, the remaining members choose a 3rd member. Staggered terms. By the way, so what does it say in the statute? The designation of a person or group who shall be responsible for enforcement of the Code of Ethics, including the maintenance of financial disclosure statements, all of which shall be available for public inspection. Receipt of complaints alleging possible violations of the Code of Ethics, issuance of opinions in response to inquiries, investigation of possible violations, and imposition of penalties. So there's a lot of things they can do, but it's partially up to you all as to what they will do. Number 2, they decided to be a 5-member board, 1 public official max. The chair is still a citizen. Number 2 is a joint commission. Could be multiple counties, could be a county city. Don't know. 1 member by the court, 1 by each of the 2 cities, 2 jointly by the executive authority with legislative approval, staggered terms. 3 is 5 members again. In this case, they said, here's what we're going to do. The clerk, the county attorney, the jailer, the sheriff, and 1 local citizens group that they named get to submit lists. And the county judge makes the appointment with fiscal court approval. 4-year terms, 2 consecutive term max. I do think it's funny. They said the clerk, the county attorney, the jailer, the sheriff, apparently they did not feel the coroner would give good candidates. I think coroners are great, but they chose not to include them. Powers and procedures. Number 1, very detailed advisory opinion power. 2, left it to the commission to establish procedures. That's fine if that's what you want to do. Advisory opinions, none listed. So again, that group or person, again, I don't know of any that just did a person, is responsible for enforcement, including the financial disclosure statement maintenance. They take care of complaints. They issue opinions. They investigate. They impose penalties. So we're going to talk about Ethics Code A. I thought about putting it on the slides, but it would have taken a heck of a lot of slides. I'm sorry, Ethics Code B. Ethics Code B is only 7 or 8 pages. Ethics Code A, which is in here somewhere. Here it is. Or County Ethics Code 1, and this is 2, is much longer. We have about a half hour. So we're going to talk about some of the things in Ethics Code number 2. So how do they do this? By the way, ethics code number 2, as I said earlier, is a joint, well, can't do that, is a joint city-county ethics code. And I think that makes a lot of sense. At least it does from a citizenry standpoint. A lot of our citizens don't necessarily understand why the city might have this policy and the county has this policy. And of course, our magistrates and commissioners online today, a lot of you all represent city residents. And they probably wonder why your code of ethics would be different than the city code of ethics. I'm not saying it has to be that way, but I think it does make a lot of sense. So in this city-county code of ethics, they have some definitions. And they define agency. Remember, I mentioned earlier, if you're going to have the word agency in there, make sure you know what that means. It's a board, it's a commission, it's an authority, it's a non-stock corporation or other entity created by the city or county. That's key, created by the city or county. So it's not every nonprofit out there. That'd be insane, and it would be probably unlawful. But it's ones you all create, either individually or jointly with any other unit of government. And remember, this is County 2's code. They define the term board. They define the term candidate, even though it's pretty much specified. Any person who's filed a petition with the clerk for the offices of the mayor, judge, legislative body, clerk, county attorney, sheriff, jailer, coroner, surveyor, justice of the peace, magistrate, and constable. They name the city. They name the code. They name what a contract is. And their contract is for any agreement for the sale, lease, or purchase of any interest in real or personal property, or for the provision of any service. So, procurement. So what is the term of Ethics Commission members? If I'm not mistaken, I'll go back and double check, but I think it comes down to what you all want them to be. Yeah. That's exactly what it doesn't address it, so it's left to you all. So what is the term of office for a ethics board member? It could be 2 years, it could be 3 years, it could be 4 years. I've never seen one go beyond 4 years. I've seen some that say you can't have more than 2 consecutive terms, and then you got to sit out a term. When I go to the second page, they actually have 3 different family member. I thought this was interesting. 3 different definitions of family member. They have dependent family member, they have family member, and immediate family member, because they use the different definitions for different portions of the code. So dependent family member is a spouse, an unemancipated child residing in your household, or an individual claimed as a dependent for tax purposes. A regular family member is your spouse, your child, your parent, your sister, your brother. Basically, it goes out to grandparents, it goes into in-laws, step-parents, step-children, and half brothers and sisters. And then immediate is a spouse, a child, a brother, a sister, or a dependent for tax purposes. They have designated employees. And they list them. They're things like the judge, deputy judge, county treasurer, county engineer, or supervisor, county parks director. This county has a fire chief. There's a lot more city employees listed. There's some joint boards listed. But they designate, and you know these designated employees are going to have responsibilities later in the code. A public official is all elected and appointed officials and all employees. And when they use the term statement, they mean statement of financial interest. They have a policy statement. I like policy statements. Basically, it's something nice. It says, hey, we think we should do something good. We know that making a false statement or report is bad. Other things like that. I don't mean to make light, but that's you all get the idea. Prohibitions and conflicts. All public officials, remember, public officials includes employees, shall avoid conflicting interests, such as don't use public property. It's not yours, right? You can't take something home because you need to borrow it. Just because the county has a piece of equipment that you just need a one-time use of doesn't mean you can just take it home and use it. We know that, right? You can't use public money for a private purpose. That's just the way it is. Political activities. It says no appointment to or employment in the city or county or agency is dependent upon political activity. No public official require any person to engage in political activity as a condition of employment. In other words, you can't say, hey, Tina Schaaf, if you want to keep your job, you got to come do this for me. It's just not the way it works. By the same token, I mean, it's not listed in here. You couldn't say, hey, Tina Schaaf, you got to come cut my grass if you want to keep your job. I mean, you could say that, but I don't think Tina would like that. I don't think Tina particularly likes me using her name as she's sort of glaring at the screen. Now she smiles. And then I may get a bad email, but that's okay. Confidentiality. All public officials should maintain strict confidentiality and not misuse information for personal or financial gain. Remember, confidentiality is a wonderful thing. We still have an Open Records Act. Remember, Open Records Act is not the Open Information Act, right? Open Records is records. Talks about gifts. You can't accept or solicit directly or indirectly any gift, whether gratuity, service, travel. So you can't solicit it from any person, corporation, or other legal entity that you know should have an interest directly or indirectly in any matter in business before the county. And again, they use public official, which includes employees. But notice what it says. Shall so directly undertake, oh, I'm sorry, where did I go? It talked about solicitation, period, versus receiving unsolicited. But that's, again, talks about that next. Notwithstanding division, E1A, a public official may accept unsolicited occasional gratuities, not to exceed $50 from any one source. Unsolicited gratuities where they offer to and remain the property of the city, county, or agency. In other words, they're giving you some sort of an award, but it's going to become county property. Admission to events in which they are invited in an official capacity. They don't, if I invite you to come to an event at the fairgrounds where everybody else is going to be paying $10 to get in, but I need you to be there to speak, or I need you there because I want to honor you, or, yeah, that's what we're getting at. Gratuities offered in appreciation for that public official speaking or making a presentation. Campaign contributions are obviously outside that. There's some other things. Financial interests. You can't have a contract with the county, is what they're saying. Some of it's statutory, some of it's by county policy. And they do grandfather in old contracts. Now they do say, and this is a good one that they put in here. It does not apply if the contract is awarded after public notice and competitive bidding unless the public official is authorized to participate in establishing the contract specs. So why do I think this is a good one? Remember, in their definition, public official includes county employees, right? How many of y'all have a road worker who also has a side business cutting grass? And you all need the grass cut at the courthouse. Why can't that guy get that side job? It has absolutely nothing to do with being a road worker in this situation, right? You might have a custodian who has a grass cutting business. Well, if you all go out to bid, he can then bid on that grass cutting for the county properties. That's what this is saying. Let's see here. The specific nature of the contract should be publicly disclosed. Remember, just so we go farther, it's okay for the custodian to have a contract with the county. It's not okay for me to have a contract with the county if I'm a magistrate or the judge. And there's some other examples in there as well in the statutes. It's part of the official record. A finding is made by the governing body. It's part of the official. The finding is part of the official record. Let's talk about that for a second. I get this question periodically. Remember, fiscal courts by statute, I think it's 67, 110 maybe, or 120. Fiscal courts are courts of record. If it's not in the record, it didn't happen. So that contract obviously would need to be approved. If you're going out to bid, it's going to be in the record. Private employment. This says no public official shall represent, for 1 year after leaving the position, shall represent any private interest in any action, litigation, or proceeding before or against the interests of. You know, there's a question on how that works, but but I get where they're trying to go. Then we go to statements of financial interest. Here's who this county and city make electeds, make candidates, make their P&Z, make any board created by this chapter. In other words, their ethics board is going to file a financial disclosure. Anybody with procurement authority exceeding 1,000 per purchase, and the designated employees. Remember, things like the road foreman, he was a designated, or she was a designated employee. And when do you file it? They say 5 p.m. by March 31, with the following exceptions. If you're appointed to a position in April, you can't file it by March 31. They give you 30 days. You can get an extension if the board will give it to you. And if there's any material change, the filer shall submit an amended statement not later than 30 days after becoming aware of the material change. The form a statement of financial interests. Basically, the board, they have given the board, the ethics board, the ability to create the form. And the board is required to get it to you by January 31, which gives this county 2 months, those employees, those that are their subject, those officials, 2 months to get it done. And if the board forgets, you still have the obligation. Who keeps the statement? The board is the official custodian, and they have to keep it for 3 years after filing, except 1 year if you're a candidate and you don't win. And they talk about the contents: name, address, business telephone number, a lot of the things that we already looked at. But again, remember, you just have to comply with the statute. If your statute doesn't require you to list all the properties you own, over $5,000 or whatever, you don't have to do it. Then they talk about nepotism. And when you look at it, their nepotism provision is pretty simple. There's one section on prohibitions. It's 5 lines. And then there's the exceptions. It's 7 lines. By the way, this policy was reviewed most recently, I believe, in 2016. At least that was the last amendment I saw. It says, no immediate family member, spouse, child, brother, sister, or any elected official or designated employee, remember things like the road foreman and the treasurer, shall be appointed to or employed in any office or position if the elected official will have any responsibility to supervise, manage, or control the work of the immediate family member. So if you hire an immediate family member, spouse, child, brother, sister, the elected or the designated can't supervise. No elected official or designated employee shall influence, advocate, or cause the employment of the immediate family member. So my immediate family member can work in this county, but I can't supervise them. Let's see here. So nothing contained herein shall disqualify any person from becoming a designated employee, providing the appointing authority is in compliance with. You don't have to dismiss your family member. So if I was a road worker and a new judge comes in and decides he wants to make me road foreman, and I work with my son doesn't have to be dismissed. My son can continue to work. So let's talk about the Board of Ethics. And again, remember, this is this county and city's code of ethics. Your code of ethics for nepotism could say, we're okay with it. It could say, we won't give a preference to a family member and leave it at that. It's up to you all. You can supervise your kid if that's what you all want. And by you all, I mean that's what the fiscal court wants. Board of Ethics is created, right? Okay, they created it. Here's the responsibilities. First thing they have in here is there's got to be a place for the Board of Ethics to meet. You know, the example we gave where Northern Kentucky Ad, they house the one for up there. The board, in this case, is 3 members, one appointed by the mayor, one appointed and approved by the City Commission, one by the judge with fiscal court approval, and this was interesting, one appointed by the County Bar Association. So the Bar Association gets one appointment. And I kind of like that, not just because attorneys are good-looking, smart people, but we are. I like it because this board has a lot of authority. When we go over that, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And I think it's good to have an attorney on the board who understands some of the legal requirements, some of the pitfalls, because some of the actions this board can take are appealable to circuit court. Because they can fine you. They're going to make recommendations for termination, perhaps. So some of the things they do are appealable to circuit court, and it sure would be good if what they do makes sense from a legal perspective. So, can't hold any other elected or appointed office, whether paid or unpaid, or any position of employment or representation with the city, county, or agency, except for legal services. It's a 3-year term. No more than 2 members shall be from the same political party, which I thought was interesting. You have to have been a resident of the county for at least 1 year prior to the date of appointment and reside in the county throughout your term. And they talk about in here, the members shall be chosen by virtue of their known and consistent reputation for integrity and their knowledge of local government affairs. And you can be reappointed up to 3 consecutive terms. You could have up to 9 years in this deal. So the vacancies are filled within 60 days. If it's not, the remaining members of the board get to fill the vacancy. And it's for the remainder of their expired term. So if I move away and I'm on the board, and I was the appointment of the Bar Association has, 60 days to appoint a new attorney. And technically, it doesn't have to be an attorney in this example, but I'm assuming the Bar Association would appoint an attorney. Members of the board don't get paid, but can be reimbursed for necessary expenses. Also says reasonable expenses. There's a chair. The board meetings are held as necessary or at the written request of the majority of the members. So the board's going to decide when they're going to meet. Now, one thing I will mention, and I think it does talk about it here later on, I would meet at least once a year if I was your board. Why? One, it'll keep everybody off your back. Let's be honest, that's part of the deal, right? But the other thing is you've created a board that actually has a role and responsibility. So in my ordinance, I think I put in that the board shall meet annually, and I'd have them meet annually after the financial disclosure statements are due. So if your financial disclosure statements are due March 31, I might have them meet sometime during the month of April. I would put in there, the board shall meet annually during the month of April each year. Well, annually means each year, right? And the reason I do that is the board can then look at the financial disclosure statements because they're the ones receiving them and make sure that everybody who's required to submit one has submitted one. The board can then, formally accept those financial disclosure statements. And the board can then file those financial disclosure statements. I don't see how you can be a board and be responsible for financial disclosure if you don't know if you've received them. And if you've never met or you haven't met in 5 years, then I have some doubts that you're doing your duty. And that's the thing is, board members have legal responsibilities, right? I would not want to be on a board that never met. By the same token, and a lot of you all have groups that you're affiliated with. I'm on the executive committee of my synagogue, and I think we meet way too often. There's a lot of nights I have to go up to my room and turn on my Zoom and watch. So I wouldn't want to be on a board that meets every day, but by gosh, if I'm a board member, I better at least meet once a year, in my opinion. That's what I would do. That's just Rich Ornstein best practice. And it's a best practice on behalf of you all, and it's a best practice on behalf of the board members for their own protection, in my opinion. Let's see here. 2 members is a quorum, and 2 members votes are necessary for action. If you have a conflict, you should disqualify yourself on the record. You're going to have minutes. Just like any other board or commission y'all create, this is governmental. They're subject to the Open Records Act, subject to the Open Meetings Act. And a board member can be removed by the city or by the county for misconduct, inability, or willful neglect. They do have the right to have a hearing. Powers and duties. They have jurisdiction over the code and the imposition of penalties. The board can initiate on its own motion. So the board on its own can do an investigation. They can also receive and investigate complaints, hold hearings, make findings of fact and determinations with regard to alleged violations. They can issue orders in connection with its investigations and its hearings. They can require persons, to submit in writing and under oath reports and answers that are relevant to the proceedings, and to order testimony to be taken by deposition for any individual designated by the board. I'm not sure exactly how that would work, but it's in here. They can administer oaths. They can issue orders requesting attendance. Not requiring, but requesting attendance and testimony, and the production of evidence. They can refer any information containing violations to the mayor, the judge, the city commission, fiscal court, the county attorney, or the other appropriate parties. They can do advisory opinions. Is it okay for me to take this job, for example? They can control and maintain all statements that are required to be filed by this code. They can develop their own reports, and they can adopt their own rules and regs. And in this county, when they do a filing and there's an investigation of a complaint, they have two possible hearings. They have a preliminary hearing to see if there's enough to really go into it, right? Is there enough there, or is this just somebody who doesn't understand what the rules and requirements are and they filed a complaint? So they do within 30 days of the proper complaint, they do a prelim. And it's, again, subject to the Open Meetings and Records Act. And if they think that there's something there, they then go to a full-blown hearing. And I'm not going to go through all of this because we're down to 12 minutes. But they have the right to do a full-blown hearing. And it's... So the notice of the hearings. The board has to issue an order setting the immediate matter for hearing. It's supposed to be conducted within 30 days from the date of the order. They can do a continuance. It's interesting, they do not require you to use the rules of civil procedure or the rules of evidence. That's why I like the idea of having an attorney. Try to keep it as much like, since some of their orders are appealable, try to keep it as much like a judicial hearing, but maybe not as complex. Prior to the commencement of the hearing, the person who has the complaint has the right to examine all documents. They have the right to have an attorney. They have the right to respond. It's taken under oath, testimony. The right to call and examine witnesses, introduce exhibits, submit evidence. Anybody whose name is going to be mentioned has the right to appear before the board. If somebody said, where are the codes on the DLG website? The codes are under legal. If you go to the legal tab, kydlgweb.ky.gov, go to the legal tab, and I believe at the top you'll see 3 categories: ethics, interlocal, and something else. And click there, and again, you can look by city or county, and almost all of them are there. If the board concludes in its report that a consideration of the evidence produced, there is clear and convincing proof of a violation, the board can issue an order requiring the violator to cease and desist. They can, in writing, reprimand the violator and provide a copy to the judge, the mayor, commission, and the court. In writing, recommend to the judge, the city commission, the fiscal court, that the violator be sanctioned. They could recommend dismissal. We all know it's just a recommendation, right? If it's a sheriff's deputy, only the sheriff can terminate. If it's a road worker, only the judge with court approval. If it's the clerk, it's only Tony Watson. I don't care which county you're in, Tony Watson has to approve it. Yes, should the ethics board be notified of changes that the court makes in their codes before or after the change is official? So, that's a great question. If it were me, I would let Well, here's the thing. Number one, it's an ordinance, right? So if your ethics board members are paying attention, because it takes 2 readings, your ethics board should know that the code's being amended. But yeah, I mean, I think that's just a judgment call on your part. I would probably notify my ethics board that I was considering making changes to the code. Now, why would I do that? You're not required to legally, but why would I do it? I would probably do it so that the ethics board doesn't just kick me in the teeth when the newspaper calls them up and says, hey, Rich Ornstein, what do you think about the changes to the ethics code? And Rich Ornstein's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, man. No idea. So if I was the fiscal court and I was going to make a change to my ethics code, you know, I can't go talk to all 3 of the board members if it's a 3-member ethics board, because that'd be a violation of the Open Meetings Act. But I'd shoot them a copy of my proposed changes and let them know what's going on. And I would definitely make sure they got a copy of that ordinance after it's passed. In fact, that would be a mandate. How can they enforce it? How can they issue advisory opinions if they don't know what's in it? That was a great question. So they can do all sorts of things in this one. And here it says you can appeal to circuit court. Now, I don't know how that would work because you're not using the rules of evidence and you're not using the rules of civil procedure. My guess is it would be kind of like a de novo hearing, basically a new hearing held by the court. Again, I don't know how that would work. They have a statute of limitations within 1 year. Again, they talk about the advisory opinions they do. They talk about the regulations they do. They talk about that you can't, if I in good faith report a violation, whether it turns out I'm right or wrong, that the city, because we know counties would never do this, the mayor and the city council can't retaliate against me for filing a complaint, right? You can penalize someone, though, who intentionally files a complaint that they know to be false. Now, again, I don't know how you would do that with Joe Citizen. I don't know that you could, but you could definitely do it with an employee. If one road worker is mad at the other road worker because he took $50 from him playing poker, and then he files a complaint that he knew was not accurate, yeah, that'd be a whole different issue. Excuse me. Except when another penalty is specified, any public official who's found by the board to have violated any provisions is deemed guilty of a civil offense and then is subject to a fine up to $1,000. Now, the city or county would have to file a civil action to collect it, but that's what they say. Let's see here. They talk about certain things in here could actually be a misdemeanor. 32.16. Okay, somebody raise their hand. Do you have a question? I only know somebody raised their hand because John just put a big screen in front of all you all that said somebody raised their hand. We'll keep going. We're almost there. Oh, I'm sorry. I see it. Go ahead and holler. Can you unmute if you have a question?
Rich, I had my hand up, but then I forgot to click the button on there. But my question was answered about the process that Tony Watson asked about the order. And as a matter of fact, would it be appropriate, or could we task our board with maybe doing some of the updates to incorporate the SPGE language? And get that going for us, as opposed to the fiscal court doing that and bringing us that language, incorporated it into our ordinance change, on our behalf, and just to get the ball rolling.
Well, it just depends on what you all want to do. So I think it's a great question, Susan. So it just depends on how you all want to do it. Already, some of you already require your SPGEs, your boards, to do everything because you specified that appointed board members have to do the financial disclosure. Appointed board members have to do X, Y, and Z. The question is, where should it originate? If that's really the question, where should an amendment to an ethics code originate? That's a judgment call, right? If my ethics board wants to originate a change, they can make that suggestion to fiscal court or to the city council, right? by the same token, they're not obligated to do so. Most cases, I think, ethics board amendments typically originate with the county, but that doesn't mean they can't originate from the board or from Joe Citizen. I mean, that's just however you all want to look at it, right? By the way, where they talked about the Class A misdemeanor in code number 2, they were talking about things like taking personal or public property and using it, right? I can't go take a backhoe home because I need to borrow a backhoe. If you intentionally file a false statement, they talk about being a Class B misdemeanor. Again, shall be guilty of a Class B misdemeanor. Talk to your county attorney before you all go down this road. There are some ethics codes that talk about the boards having the right to hire their own attorneys, which they do, or that you all will provide one. Sometimes there can be a conflict with the county attorney providing that advice. Some of the ethics codes, I think it's in ethics code number 1 that I gave you, talks about the fact that if an employee is called in front of the ethics code, obviously they can bring in an attorney. Not everybody can afford an attorney. And in that situation, it states that the county attorney will find an attorney if they make that request for the employee with the county to pay the bill. Again, those are some of the things that are there. We have 3 minutes by my watch. For those of you on Eastern time, that means in a half hour I can have lunch. But was there another question? I thought I heard a voice.
Me.
Yes,
Rich, I
ma'am?
wanted to ask, I just received a text message and I don't think we can, but as elected officials, I've been asked to support a candidate that's, they want me to walk with them on Saturday. I said, no, that's against our ethics. Am I right or not?
Well, if it's raining, you should definitely say no, because you don't
I'm
want to
gonna
get
say
wet.
no, period.
That's just my opinion. You know, this is actually an interesting question. I'm going to answer it a little different than you asked it. I've
Okay.
had 3 questions so far from 3 county clerks who have asked whether or not the sheriff can sit on the local board of elections if the sheriff has endorsed a candidate. And by endorsed a candidate, I might mean appeared in a commercial with that candidate. And the short answer is they can do that. They have, while they can't sit on the year that they run, there was an old attorney general's opinion. That's why I think they can do it. There's an old attorney general's opinion from the late 70s or the early 80s. And what it basically said was, Mrs. Whoever sits on the local board of elections. Her husband was running for, I forget, fiscal court or city council. And the question was, could she continue to sit on the local board of elections while her spouse was running? And the answer was yes. She could still sit while her spouse was running. And you and I both know, if your spouse is running for office, you better be campaigning for your spouse, right? So again, in the situation with the sheriffs that have endorsed a candidate on TV, they still can sit there. So you don't lose your rights necessarily, Magistrate Ferguson, as a citizen because you ran for office. Whether or not it's a good idea, a bad idea, that's your call to make. I've gone door to door back when I was a lot younger, before I went to work for the state, and I was very pleased and happy that the state did not want me to do that anymore. But if you want to go walk, by all means, I think that's within your rights. You do want to check your ethics code to make sure there's not an issue. My suspicion, though, even if there is an issue in there, you, again, did not give up your right as a citizen. So talk to your county attorney if you think there is a problem. My suspicion is your ethics code probably does not address it.
Okay, thank you very much. I
ma'am.
really appreciate it.
Anything else before we go?
Rich, I was just going to say, I don't think Magdalene could probably get back from San Francisco by Saturday.
Well, it might be easier to Zoom walk.
Looks
with
like
her.
she's
Carrying
out,
a cell phone.
out in front of the Golden Gate Bridge there. So
I wish.
So
No, at home in my house.
it's okay. We won't tell anybody.
I think Judge Ison had a question there, Rich.
Judge?
Which county attorneys can have private practice of law as well as hold the office of county attorney?
Yes.
Can the Ethics Commission say, or the courts say, you cannot join a firm which may practice law against you?
You know, that's a great question, Judge. Kind of wish you hadn't asked it. No. So here's the thing. obviously, there are certain requirements to run for office. There are certain requirements to hold office. We can't change eligibility for office. By the same token, a county attorney, and it's easier with a county attorney in some aspects, they also have responsibilities based on what the Kentucky Bar Association has created, based off what our rules require. And you can't sue yourself, right? That's part of the issue. I mean, his job, or her job, in your case, it's a he, Judge Eisen, he can't be part of a suit against the county. There's no doubt about that. I don't know that you could prohibit him from being with Ornstein and Ornstein Law Firm. He may have to recuse himself. He may have some professional responsibilities. But I think if the Bar Association says it's allowable under their standards of conduct, it's probably permissible that he remains with that firm. I don't know what would happen if you all tried to prohibit it. Honestly, I don't know what would happen if you all tried to prohibit it. My suspicion is he would still be allowed to be with that firm. He would just have to have no authority in that matter. But the Bar Association may very well say you can't do it. I know that's a nice way of me not quite answering the question, because I don't know exactly how the Bar Association would rule. Though again, I suspect that the county attorney would have an issue because again, under Chapter 69, he is your legal counsel. And I apologize if I look like I'm moving my head. The screen here is huge, but the picture sometimes moves. So Judge Eisen was at the bottom, and I don't know where he is now. Oh, there he is. He's at the top.
Rich, thank you so much, and thanks for all the support you give all of us judges. I can't thank you enough for how you're always there.
And my pleasure that you all keep calling so I stay employed. I would have liked it even more if Jim was still on the screen, but can't win them all, right? Do y'all have anything else? If not, what we'll do is go ahead and break. Again, don't hesitate to call. Like I always tell y'all, it's easier to fix it before than after. 800-264-5226. My cell is 859-333-8350. If it's on ethics codes, if there's some issues with your ethics codes, if you have questions, concerns, we're happy to help you with them. We're happy to talk with folks. I think we're doing one more of these classes, John, in November, and then as needed, we'll probably do another class for sure, if not sooner. We're going to start doing these every 4 years in the year after the election. But if you need help, if you think there's somebody, if you have an ethics board that you'd like to have training, give us a call. There may be some things we can do to assist you all. And again, I thank you all very much, and I appreciate you all. Yes, ma'am?
Rich, I would encourage everyone to get on the DLG website on that legal tab and check the ordinance document that's posted. I just found that it looks like ours is not the most recent one. So everybody might want to check to see that they have the most recent one filed at DLG.
Now, do remember, folks, and I thanks. Do remember, just because DLG doesn't post the most recent one doesn't mean that you all didn't file the most recent one. Make sure when you send it to them that you keep record of when you sent it. If you did it via email, keep a copy of that email. Probably wouldn't hurt. Do a notarized statement. I sent Franklin County Ethics Code to the Department of Local Government via U.S. mail on this date. I'd let them know it's coming. But again, if you do have a concern that they don't have the most recent version, let them know, because you don't want to create an issue where you're operating on one version and they have a different version. Jim, you have anything you wanted to say before we go?
All good. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you all. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. Y'all have a great day.
Okay.